Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine
What's
a light
your
on
story?
incredible impact. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I am your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Jessica Lopez, a disability advocate and consultant. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat with you. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to, talk about, some of the work that I'm doing as well.
Thank you, Jessica. And yeah, you have an incredible journey and story. So let's dive into it. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Jessica Lopez. I was born without hands and feet. I also live with chronic illness. And I became chronically ill at the age of 10 years old, and it's completely unrelated to my physical disability. And it's really more of an undiagnosed condition that, I've had to go through the medical system to try to get, the support that I need. And kind of my experiences with both a physical, a very visible disability, and an invisible disability has really given me a unique perspective in terms of just how the world treats disabled people, how they think of disability. And I decided, I wanted to start sharing my experiences with disability inclusion and the ways that we can support people with disabilities to help them, get the access and the support that they need in the world. So now I am a disability consultant. I do trainings with corporate organizations around disability inclusion. And yeah.
How old were you when you first kind of like found your voice and were like, I really want to do something and become an advocate?
That's a really good question. Feel like I was a little bit late in that. It was actually 2020, and during that year, there was a lot of, upheaval going on, a lot of, social discussions that were going on around social justice. And I ran into a post on disability rights and kind of the history of that and how it impacts people. And up until that point, I had never even heard of disability rights. I hadn't really learned anything about the ADA. I knew it kind of existed, but I didn't really know like the history and the grassroots activism that came to, make that happen. And once I kind of saw that post, I was like, I need to know more about this. And so I started doing a lot of research around like how this was happening or how disability inclusion really benefits the world and benefits people without disabilities as well. And I really saw a connection to it in like how disabled people experience ableism and kind of the microaggressions they experience in the world. And I saw a lot of parallels with my life. And up until that point, I was just kind of like, well, that's just how people are. People have, assumptions or stereotypes. But I didn't really have a name or a label to exactly explain those experiences. So I did a lot of research to kind of, build that vocabulary and understand exactly how disabled people experience, um, just being thought of differently or maybe even, treated as lesser than or, getting a lot of, assumptions. So I decided this is what I want to do. I want to create my I want to create my career around disability advocacy and share my experiences with both, trying to get accessible education and trying to, go into the workforce as someone who lives with chronic illnesses and, physical disabilities.
Is there any like memorable moment or story as a disability consultant or really as a person with this disability that has kind of left a lasting impact on you?
Yeah, I think a lasting impact, someone in the disability community that has given me a lasting impact was actually Tiffany Yu. She is the founder of Diversibility. And while I was like doing a lot of research around disability inclusion, I found Diversibility, I found the Facebook group and the Instagram And that was actually the first post that I saw from around disability inclusion, what diverse disabilities post that went viral. And I was like, I really want to, create a career based on like what she was doing. She went from, a corporate career into disability inclusion and, doing those public speaking opportunities. And also creating that community of disability pride versus like a support group. And for myself, I have been raised as like, hey, maybe there's a support group out there for, you. And I'm like, but I don't my disability is so rare. I don't think that there is a support group for someone like me. And for me, that wasn't really the kind of path that I needed. I just felt that I needed more community around, just disability pride, and instead of like a support group just had a different feeling. And so Tiffany posted about a job. She was hiring a social media manager, and I was like, this is my opportunity to learn from what she's doing, and also, try to help build my own career. So I applied to be a social media manager for the disability, and I got the job. And I think that really launched my career. And I've been able to learn from her and what she's doing, and kind of the strategy that she uses to develop her career and kind of model my own experiences and my own knowledge and outreach after that. So yeah, I really appreciate what she's done. Also connecting me to the greater disability community in general. Like there's just so many people out there who are doing incredible things like yourself, all in their own neck of the woods.
And that's the beautiful thing about the disability community. It's like we all have different stories, we all have different abilities, we all do unite along a common voice, a common common passion of making a difference, bringing more access and inclusion to the world, of breaking down barriers. And the more we can do it together, the stronger we are. And if we can learn from each other, we can build confidence and learn if someone else can do it, I can do it too. And it's a beautiful thing to find that there's different paths that you can take in life, and there's not just one. There's so many. It's up to you to choose which path you take. And I love that you have mentors and mentees, and like I will always be a mentor and mentee because I will always have more to learn from others, and I will always have more to give to others. And I think that the disability community, which doesn't mean you have to have a disability to be a part of it, you can be have a family member, a friend, a loved one. You can be in the workspace that is involved with the disability, or have a coworker. We're all united together within the disability community, and it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that drew me to it was that I think a lot of times when you think of the disability community, like from the outside looking in, you think of it as kind of like a fractured community. Like there's one group that's advocating for autism, there's another group advocating for whatever disability that they have, and that can be scary at times because there's so many disabilities to like wrap your head around and understand. But if you look at it as a whole, it's such a large community with over 1 billion people out there with disabilities. I mean, there's so many people who are, creating incredible things and innovating and, changing the way we experience the world, not only just for disabled people, but also for non-disabled people as well.
I love that. And when you hear the word accessibility, what first comes to mind for you?
That's a really good question. I think the first word that comes to mind when I think of accessibility is innovation. And the reason for that is because when I was doing a lot of my research at the beginning of, learning about disability rights and the culture of disability, I discovered that disabled people are innovators. They have created technology that we use every single day. And I have a couple of examples of that. The first one is actually the keyboard, which was created by a blind woman and her brother. And she was like, hey, I want to be able to write letters too. So they started working together on the keyboard so that she could just memorize the keys and she could write letters. And now we use that every single day, in our computers. And it started from her developing the accessibility she needed for herself. And the same thing for smartphones. Smartphones were based on touchscreen technology, and that was created by a man named Wayne Westerman, who created a company called Fingerworks, and he had carpal tunnel. couldn't use, anything with buttons. And this was like in the 90s when cell phones were starting to come out, and you just couldn't use those cell phones because of the buttons. So he worked on technology where he could use a cell phone or a device without, having to press on it and hurt himself. And that technology ended up being sold to Apple, and it went into the iPhone. And he was doing that out of his own necessity of building access that he needed for himself, and it benefited the rest of the world from that. And I think um, when you think about accessibility, you think about it sometimes as a form of charity or trying to, just help disabled people. But at the same time, when you're building accessibility, you're benefiting non-disabled people as well, and you're also benefiting companies who are bringing in that accessibility, and it can, help them innovate and make their products better for, themselves as well.
I love that, Jessica, and thank you for sharing those stories. I did not know many of those facts and background. That's so cool. And what is like one thing you wish people knew more about people with disabilities that they really don't know about?
I think the first thing is I'll share two different things. I think the first thing is that disability is not automatically a bad thing. I know, like, going, navigating the world and experiencing the world in a very different way from a lot of other people and meeting with other people. I think their first assumption is that they see me and they're like, wow, your life must be so hard. It must be so challenging. If I were you, I would be miserable. And to that, I always say, my life is not different. It's not necessarily harder. It's just different. And I think it's important to distinguish, uh, being different from having a hard or difficult or worse life than other people. And for myself, I can function and do things on my own independently. And I know a lot of other disabled people who are working to build that independence as well. And when you live within your body, then you can be happy and confident and healthy, even with that disability. And I think a lot of times the automatic default is that disability is such a bad thing, something to be avoided. And I think it's really important to know that disability is just another factor of life, just like any other method of diversity or diversity. Um, and then the second thing I think that people should know about people with disabilities is that there is such a wide range of perspectives around disability. People see disability in so many ways. Someone with the same disability might see themselves and their body differently than someone else who has that same disability. And it's important to recognize that even within, people who seem very similar on the outside can, experience things very differently. They can have completely different capabilities. They can have completely different experiences. So it's really important to kind of know that disability is not a monolith. It's really diverse within the community as well.
So true. And as a consultant that works with lots of businesses, like what are some of the biggest gaps that you see for businesses that are prioritizing or not prioritizing access and inclusion?
Absolutely. I think the biggest gap is that companies just aren't doing the work to be inclusive within the hiring process, and then with keeping those disabled employees within the company. So a lot of times disabled people will be brought into the company and they'll be like, hey, this might work out. And then somewhere along the line, that inaccessibility just kind of pushes them out of the workforce. And a lot of times I think people think of uh, the reason for that being that because they're disabled, but I'd like to challenge that assumption that it's not necessarily because they're disabled, it's because the environment around them is not being conducive to their strengths and their weaknesses in a way that can help them expand and improve on, whatever they're working on. And so I think the first thing is to challenge the assumption that people with disabilities can't work or they can't do all of the same things that someone else could within the company. And I think the next thing is that companies are worried about hiring disabled people because they're afraid of having to spend a lot of money to actually like accommodate a disabled person. So they say, well, if I don't have to spend that money, then things might just be a lot easier. What I found actually is around 16% of accommodations actually cost nothing at all. So what this means is that most of the time, those accommodations are not actually like having to spend thousands of dollars to make that happen. A lot of times, it just has to do with improving processes or making things more flexible. And so, I think a lot of companies uh, we have to let them know and challenge those assumptions about how disabled people experience the workforce, and if they start to learn and kind of unlearn a lot of those assumptions, I think a lot more disabled people will be able to be included within the workforce, especially now that remote work is really expanding since the pandemic.
And so many of those accommodations, if you're providing it, it's really not even an accommodation, it's just a performance enhancer. You
Mm-hmm.
want to enhance all of your employees to be at the best of their abilities, to have the best performance outcomes, give the most output to the current work product that you're trying to do. So you're it's smart business to provide performance enhancers or accommodations, whatever you want to call it. But Jessica, thank you so much for being our guest today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. Love your story, love your voice, love what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and really love the work that you're doing as well. I think kind of your story and kind of developing your career in the way you have is something that I want to model my own career after, and so I think it's really important to keep meeting those disabled people who are breaking the barriers and kind of breaking those assumptions of what disabled people can and can't do and how to navigate the world. So I really appreciate all of everything that you're doing as well.
Thank you, Jessica. And to all of our guests, thank you so much for staying to the end of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to follow us at accessiB_community. And everyone, until next time, thanks for being on this journey with us. Bye, everyone.